And I just remember sitting in a chair and I was so comfortable in this chair, and I'd put my head to the side and I was talking to people like out the corner of my mouth. I couldn't really open my mouth, and I was just like, this is the best thing I've ever felt. This is fucking amazing. I don't want to move and shit. And people were being a bit like, okay,
yeah.
Chill out. But I think I had that in me, like, to just really, I suddenly was like, oh, this is how I've always wanted to feel, like this is what I want life to be like.
And I wanted to ask you, what's the first drug you ever tried that was off the beaten path? So it's not, caffeine, booze, weed, like it's something that really wasn't on the mainstream radar for you. And how was that experience?
I guess it depends how off the beaten path you mean. Mephedrone was the first like drug I tried. I guess it's referred to in other places as like meow meow or MCAT, and sometimes in America it's broadly categorized as bath salts, along with loads of other drugs that were legal at the time that were made in Chinese labs, and you could buy it very cheaply from the internet. That was the first drug I tried apart from weed or alcohol. You said
it's called mephedrone or methadrone?
Mephedrone, just MEPHEDRONE. That was what got me into doing the drug videos on BigDome, actually, because I did a couple of videos on mephedrone. I mean, I started that channel just because I'd gone for a breakup and I was like lonely, so I just thought I'm just going to sort of put my thoughts out into the world. Yeah. I did these mephedrone videos, and they got I started podcasting.
Sorry to cut you off. I started podcasting after a breakup, by the way, so maybe there's a similar, we're in our simulation obeys similar laws, that when you go through a clusterfuck of emotion, you start just talking to people or yourself.
Then you have so much free time suddenly, right? When you're not in a long-term relationship. Like,
exactly. It's like people, I'm asking guests on, and at the beginning they're like, this is totally because this person is interested in me, which I was, but in a way it's also like reaching out for connection. But sorry to cut you off. You're talking about the mephedrone experience.
Yeah, it is amazing, and that's the best thing about the internet, I think. And yeah, those are the only things I've done really that just seem to have gotten picked up by the algorithm on YouTube. I always just thought this was like a mythical thing that happens to other people. I mean, they haven't got a huge amount of views, but I didn't really post them anywhere. And just that word mephedrone, I think so many people who were around at that time and remembered the sort of mephedrone craze had at some point looked at a mephedrone video on YouTube, and the minute they saw that, they were like, oh shit, mephedrone. It's something that invokes a kind of a weird nostalgia in people, and maybe a bit of disgust, and also it's very euphoric. It's a sort of euphoric stimulant kind of drug, I guess. It's somewhere like a cross between MDMA and cocaine. It's got this sort of instantaneous pleasure and ridiculousness of cocaine, and then it's got the empathetic kind euphoric feeling of MDMA.
Sounds like a hell of a time.
Man, like, I don't want to encourage it because it's dirty, really, that stuff, and you can't really get it now anyway. Yeah. But man,
did you say it was legal at the time?
It was legal. You could buy a gram of it for like £8 or £9 on the internet. So like $11 or $12.
Yeah.
And a gram would easily do you a night, like easily. You would. I mean, when you first start, a gram would do like 3 or 4 people probably. I can't remember, but I mean, to be fair, you have the lines of it are much bigger than what you would have with a normal drug. Mm-hmm. And we used to just really, you should crush it into a powder, but we used to just sniff it as like crystal. It burns like fuck, man. It's like sniffing crushed glass, really. It's like so painful. And you get so addicted to that pain as well. It feels really nice after a while because you associate it with the thing.
Could you not grind it up into a powder? Like the crystals were so hard.
Oh no, we were just fucking idiots, basically. It was really
you're snorting the rocks.
Yeah, it's like crystal. It's like coarse sea salt, and you could crush that sea salt into fine, powder. And one of my friends did. He used to crush his, and we all just thought he was being like a fucking nerd. We were like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "Makes it last longer," and we just kind of ignored him. But yeah, it's so. I mean, I remember the first. I was really scared to have it, and then the first time I had it, I was just like, "Fuck!" Like I didn't want to move, and I just remember sitting in a chair, and I was so comfortable in this chair, and I put my head to the side, and I was talking to people like out the corner of my mouth. I couldn't really open my mouth, and I was just like, "This is the best thing I've ever felt. This is fucking amazing. I don't want to move and shit." And people were being a bit like, "Okay,
Yeah.
chill out." But I think I had that in me, like to just really. I suddenly was like, "Oh, this is how I've always wanted to feel," like this is what I want life to be like, and yeah, it felt incredible. But it was very easy to go over the top on it. It was like you'd get very, especially when you're a teenager and you're just like ridiculous, and you're full of like hormones and shit. You just talk shit basically, and everyone fucking loves each other so much until like the next day when they like are paranoid and don't like each other and don't trust each other and don't want to be around each other, and it all would just get very for a while, for quite a few years, I couldn't even think about it. As soon as I thought about the mephedrone era, I was just like, oh, and I just wanted to block it out.
Yeah.
Now I do look at it with a lot of nostalgia, and I find it funny to remember it. But
what do you think that was trying to block it out? Was that shame? Was that you just didn't want to think about it because it would make you want to get back into it? Like, what was the feeling that made you push it away?
Shame, yeah, shame and sort of embarrassment, and a feeling of, the feeling of loss of control, like thinking that, I would sniff a line of it and then just the rest of the night was on a whim. Like I wasn't really making conscious decisions, or I would get drunk and then I'd be like, have to buy some mephedrone and then do that. And then the whole night is just, again, it's like, the amount of times we all just completely lost control of ourselves, and then you don't want to come down, and you do anything to like get more and to stay awake and keep doing it, and it gets very. There's something about that feeling, I think, that makes you cringe when you remember it.
Yeah, that's insane. That for a period of time, you can buy the offspring of cocaine and MDMA. Like if they fucked, that was just a pill online that you could purchase for $10. Like. That's wild. And I didn't know, like I've done some more research. I don't know if it's a designer drug or where it comes from, but there's so many things out there that are legal that I wasn't even aware of that seem to have similar effects based on what other people are saying on Reddit and like forums like that where I've looked around. But that's nuts that you could buy something like that for such a cheap amount of money. And just like have it delivered to you like an Amazon package. That is insane that you could just that easily get your hands on something like that.
Yeah, it was dangerous. And it gave it an air of legitimacy that meant people who wouldn't even smoke weed were taking this. So it really like swept through the whole, it was a very small town, and it just like kind of took over. Like it was really surprising. I mean, it really changed the atmosphere in the town. Like it became very popular in I wouldn't even say my social group, in my age group in general. I mean, more normal kids, they had tried it. They wouldn't necessarily say they were using it all the time. A lot of them, I think, were normal and well-rounded enough where they would maybe have 1 or 2 weekends on it and think that was nice, but I don't really want to keep doing this because it's affecting my studies or my life, and it's a bit crazy. But they would try it, I mean, everyone, because people would say, don't worry, have a line, it's legal, it's fine. Like I bought it online and it was so cheap. It was just like so fucking cheap.
Quick bathroom break. And now we're back. Right before we left off, you said that mephedrone was the best feeling that you've had. Was that more of a, like, because you said it's a combination of cocaine and MDMA, and you spoke about kind of leaning back in your chair, kind of sluggishly, and talking to people. Did you feel mentally like you were sluggish in a way, like you almost zanned out, barred out, something like that? Like, were you mentally awake and just kind of like physically sitting back? Like, what was if you had to describe the best feeling, what were kind of the what was the internal chatter like? What was the physical sensation like? Things like that.
It was like just pure like euphoria and physical pleasure, like this feeling of like, it's almost like a physical optimism. It's like you just feel so open to everything that's going on, and it just feels really pleasurable. I mean, it's like sort of, it's like a cross between a perfect mix of kind of physical and mental pleasure. You just feel good, and that doesn't do it justice, because when you think of feeling good, you imagine it in a day-to-day sense, you know, feeling upbeat or whatever. But it's a lot more, because you've got this feeling coursing through your body as well, where it's just like, it's just so fucking good. I don't know how to describe it. It was stimulating, I guess. And people thought it was weird that I was just sitting in the chair. They were all like, why don't you want to get up and like move around? But I think I was enjoying it so much that I didn't want to, you know, it's like if you see like a beautiful bird on your lawn and you're like, don't move, don't move, don't move. Just fucking sit here and stare at it. You know, I didn't want it to go away. And I just wanted to sit there and take it in. And I guess other people were maybe a bit more relaxed about it, but I was just like, this is good enough. I don't need anything, you know. I'm just, but I've always been that way a bit. I mean, like with MDMA, for example, a lot of people think of that as a drug for like raving and partying, and I never have. For me, I always wanted to just like chill on it, basically. Maybe walk around a bit, but not like be super active, you know, and enjoy the kind of mental and physical sensation of it more, rather than the stimulatory effects.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
Well, just to your question, like the only one thing I guess is when you have a thought and you just have an inane thought, like I'll be like, oh, I want to like ask you about your shirt or whatever, or say I like one of those paintings on the wall, and all the endorphins in my brain and body are like, yes, ask that question. That's so good. That's exactly the right thing to say. I can't wait to hear the answer. This is so brilliant. And like these endorphins are telling you this, and it wouldn't matter what thought I had. You know, I could have a completely different thought. I could want to ask you about your microphone or something. Whatever it was, my brain was just flooding me with like, oh, this is just perfect. Everything is so great. Everything is so good, which is ridiculous, really, you know, but drugs can induce that.
Yeah, it sounds almost like Adderall in a way, like snorting Adderall. I somehow made it through college without trying Adderall, and then when I started studying for the CPA exam for accounting, because I was an accounting major in a different life and use none of that now. Except when I file my taxes. But I was studying for the CPA exam, and it was so dull, like the most boring shit you can imagine. And one of my friends was prescribed Adderall, and then I took it just as the tablet first, and everything just became instantaneously interesting. And I couldn't wait to tell my friend that I was sitting across from about tax law, which 30 minutes before was the most inane, just fucking burned out subject in my mind that I did not want to visit at all. And then it made accounting interesting, which if anyone's like, not that Adderall needs an advertisement, and I'm not suggesting people take it if they're not prescribed it, but if there was going to be an advertisement for it, I would say it makes accounting interesting. And I started drinking on it and then snorting it before I would go out. And I just remember the Adderall combined with the alcohol would make me feel so like everything I thought had to be said. And it was the best idea, more than just drinking alone, because drinking kind of lowers the inhibitions and raises the ego where you feel a little bit superhumanish in a way with your thoughts and ideas, but Adderall just exacerbated that to a level I'd never experienced. And when you were talking about just having to get things out, like I see a painting on the wall and I want to tell this person my thoughts on it because it is undeniable how brilliant my comments are in that moment. That's the way that I thought when I would, you know, look at someone's sneakers in a bar and I would just have to tell them that why the design on it was pleasing to me. And after I said it, I'd be like, yeah, like this was a substantial moment for this person. Like they're gonna, you know, their life is changed by how I just described their sneakers to them.
Yeah, you'd be like smiling and feeling so, and then as part of you is like, why can't I just be like that? Really, it's pretty, and it makes you think when someone is like really mean to you or something, you think like they probably just feel like shit, basically, because when you're on like MDMA, for example, and you feel so peaceful and good and euphoric, you're just so fucking nice to everyone, like, and you just want to be, why wouldn't I be nice? You feel a generosity of spirit because you feel like you have all this goodness inside you, so you're like, why wouldn't I be nice? And then when you're on a come down, you're like, I have no fucking time to be nice. I don't want to be nice to anyone. I'm not interested in anything. Just leave me alone. You know, it's weird. And it does put into perspective, I guess, why some people are such dicks, really, because probably a lot of the time they just don't feel good.
Yeah. That's one of the more, it might be the most positive aspect that experimenting with drugs like MDMA or Adderall has had on my life, that knowing that frame of mind is possible, and I may not be able to tap into it in the same way where I'm sober or I'm drinking coffee, but I know what it feels like to be completely overwhelmed with warmth and kindness when I just see someone that has a clothes that I like, or just having a basic conversation, meeting someone for the first time. I can tap into the emotions of past moments where I'd felt those overwhelming sensations. And because I know that, in a sense, I've done repetitions like that before. Like I played baseball for almost 20 years. And part of the reason why I had confidence when I went on the field is because I know I was performing repetitions of exercises and pitches in the past that I could tap into when it was game time. And in a way, it's almost like the repetitions that I've had on different drugs and the way that I've treated people that have been positive, because I've also had experience where I felt ashamed too, like, what the fuck am I saying? You know, how could I do that? Shit like that. But the positive experience has acted as a repetition where I can then say, okay, I've been here. You know, it's not going to be the same thing when I'm not on this drug, but I know that it's possible for me to open my soul in a way where I can just be 10% more kind in this moment, or just 10% more curious, and let that lead the way, rather than give in to the feeling of, yeah, fuck this person, or I'm feeling this way right now, so therefore I have to live through the half-life of this emotion until it's over, rather than trying to consciously flip a switch and just tell myself, okay, just be a little bit kinder and see what happens, because I've done that before.
Yeah. I think that is exactly what's good about drugs. I think if a drug changes you, I think it's failed, and it's a bad thing. It shouldn't change you. It should just give you it should show you the possibility of change. Like, and I think that's what puts people off is, if you hear about someone who's done like ayahuasca or something, and they're like, they're totally different. And even if it's positive, you think, oh, that's a bit scary. Like, they've gone away and done this thing, and it's almost like they're not there anymore. It's a new person. But it's not. It's not that the drug changed them inherently or chemically. It's that it broadened their perspective in the same way that going on holiday might, traveling to a foreign country or just meeting new people. It broadens your perspective, and it shows you other options. So exactly like you say, you realize like, oh, you can actually just feel very open towards others. It is possible. So yeah, like you say, you might not be able to fully access it, but you know that it's possible, and you can access a little bit of it. And I think that is what makes them so good. Even when they're bad experiences, you can think, okay, I can fall into paranoia. That's a thing that can happen to me, so I have to be cautious of that. Whatever it is, it's really about how you interpret that information moving forward that determines the effect it has on you, unless you abuse the drug so heavily that it has a chemical effect on you as well, which is where I think the big problem is really with things like MDMA. The perspective broadening effect is incredible, but if you do it all the time, like I did, you just get so depressed.
Yeah.
And it will override. You know, you really only need to have a few experiences on it to see like how amazing the world can be and how different your mind can be. You don't actually need to do it a lot.
So was mephedrone? It sounds like it was less intense than MDMA. Because my first MDMA experience, I was actually at a festival. I was at Lollapalooza. And I just remember I had such a good time, but the next day I felt so like I was lucky enough to not have the intense, come down of being depressed for a few days after that people describe, but I just felt like I was just so tired that I couldn't imagine doing that again quickly and having it be a positive experience. Was mephedrone like that, or were you able to do it back to back to back nights and feel like this isn't completely wearing me out?
No, at that age we didn't stay up too long. I think the longest we did was like 2 days, maybe a day and a half. Later in life I got into like long benders on other stuff, and that is like the worst thing you can do. But I think to us, to be honest, the idea of staying up for multiple days was it was so alien that even our sort of fiendishness for this drug wouldn't really push us there, because it was not something we really thought you could do. Do you know what I mean? And we had to go to school and shit. So it got to a point we would do it every weekend. Sometimes we do it multiple weekends in a row. I think a couple of times maybe we did it in the week after having done it at the weekend. But no, it wasn't, certainly in the manner in which we were doing it, it wasn't easy to just keep doing it over and over again. There'd be quite a long process of feeling, as you say, like exhausted and having to like sit around smoking weed and feeling really bad and getting into some quite nasty psychological states, really.
Yeah.
What
was
it's
nasty?
One thing as an adult when you...
I was just going to say, what was nasty about the psychological state? When did it start to turn bad?
Well, a lot of the positivity from the drugs, I think, was masking a lot of weird social stuff that was going on anyway. So I always just felt like a weirdo and stuff. I always felt very bad about, well, I mean, not always totally bad about myself. My actual self, I guess, but felt very bad socially. I felt very, like inadequate socially and like whatever else, and had a lot of insecurities and demons and shit. So those were there anyway, and we used to all smoke way too much weed, and we were kind of always in some kind of bad state, I would say. And then there would just be these days where you weren't that way when you were taking drugs, and then it would all come sort of crashing back down, and you'd feel weird around each other, and you disassociate a bit, and this part of you is like, why am I here? Like, I know why I'm here, but I don't really know why I'm here in this room. I suddenly feel like I don't know these people and I have nothing to say to them, and I don't want to say, and part of you is like, why 3 hours ago was this the best feeling in the world and I couldn't wait to talk to these people about anything and everything, and now I don't want to say what. There's nothing I want to speak to them about. I don't want to really be around them. And then you start to feel paranoid, like, did I do something wrong? Does everybody think I'm a weirdo? Is my life terrible? And you just start having all these anxious thoughts. And then I would start thinking about highfalutin sort of universal concepts and things as well, and life and death and shit. And it would all just get very unpleasant and bleak, and we weren't really eating or sleeping properly, so it was just that kind of weird drug-induced paranoia, I guess, which is if you make drugs your lifestyle and you're not careful, that just becomes normal. That those bad feelings, you sort of accept them as just part of life, like feeling absolutely terrible and there being nothing you can do about it. That becomes a regular occurrence if you take too many drugs. And eventually it becomes everything.
Yeah, that feeling of sitting around with people and feeling connected to them, and then just a couple hours later feeling like, what the fuck am I doing here? I've had that when I've done cocaine. And the way that it typically happens is someone will have coke and then other people form in a group of strangers, like half people that you know. It's almost like when a fucking lion kills a gazelle and then the other lions kind of go around it and just kind of pick off the other parts of the gazelle that the lion's not eating. It felt like that in a way, where the coke was like a fucking open carcass and then people gravitate towards that, and all of a sudden you're standing in an apartment kitchen feeling so euphoric at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and then a few hours later when it runs out and the sun starts to come up, you were just having, you know, really in the moment excited conversations with people and feeling connected to them and bouncing ideas off the wall that were, you know, 99% shit anyway. I used to have a note file in my phone of things that I would think of. And I remember, well, I still do, but I remember one night that I was on cocaine, I had like 3 times the length of a note that I had ever created sober before. And it was just things like, move to your favorite podcaster's city and just make them give you a job as a producer so you would find your way into the podcasting world. Like go knock on Joe Rogan's door and like tell him that you came here to be his new producer or something. Like just like the dumbest shit that you could think of. And then that feeling goes away and the come down starts to happen. And then you're like, how are these things so close together? And it's being tied together by the drug, opposite sides of the same coin. And it does baffle you in a way, because you could be walking home or taking the subway home and you're just feeling like such shit. And you could rewind the clock, you know, just an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you were having the time of your life. So it is this weird dichotomy that a drug like cocaine, and it sounds like mephedrone also induces, where it's like this kind of instant pleasure, euphoria, and it fades very quickly. Like there's a very harsh reality check.
Yeah, and it's exactly as you say. Coke is the perfect example, isn't it? It's so, like you say, it's so close together. It's weird. And the thing with Coke is you don't really get much of value that you can take from it afterwards when you reflect. You just sort of think, man, I was a fuck. Yeah, you have ideas like that. And you're like, yeah, why the fuck not? You know, man, he'll probably like it. He'll probably think it's great. Like, yeah, you just got to fucking try it, haven't you? It'll be difficult, but why not? Yeah, you got to take risks, blah, blah, blah. And you talk someone else into it who you barely know, or to like making a movie or something. And then, yeah, you feel the opposite when you're coming down. You're like, I can't do anything, and everything is terrible. You know, my life is like so limited. It's weird, isn't it? It's a disconcerting feeling. Yeah, I don't miss that. I don't really take a lot of drugs anymore, and I don't miss that part of it. It's so inevitable, and you always tell yourself, no, I can just power through. But if you take enough, you'll always have like terrible come downs and be in terrible states psychologically.